Hi, Feixiao has been finally released, and the Memory of Chaos that is made to sell her is quite interesting, as we see the return of the Kafka and the Adventuring boss fight, which can both get pretty annoying if you do not have the right tools to help you, especially Kafka with her Spirit Whisper and Adventuring with his Gamma mechanic. So in this video I'll be going through some of the meta teams to see which are the best to be used in this new MOC. Before we start, I stream sometimes on Twitch, link in the description, and I'll be giving away a supply pass / welcoming to my subscribers at 6k subs, so make sure you subscribe to enter. Let's start by going through the enemies in each half. In the first half, we are versing the Kafka boss. This is a very old boss, but one that will still give many people problems, especially if the fight goes on. It is recommended to build effect res and or have units that are able to cleanse, as the Spirit Whisper attack she has is really annoying. Other than that, making sure you have a strong sustain to tank her DOT is also recommended. As for the rest of the enemies, the new Howling Cascade does make an appearance here as well, but it's not a big problem. You just have to make sure you're aware when your units will become terrified and take more damage. Then in the second half, we are going against the infamous Adventuring boss. This boss has caused many people problems in the past, as he is fast and has a very hard mechanic in the second phase, where he literally makes you gamble, and if you don't win, you take huge amount of damage from him. However, thankfully, this mechanic can be counteracted by simply using characters that have AoE/blast attacks. So for this half, make sure you're using as many AoE/blast characters as possible, and make sure you're building your team relatively fast, as Adventuring boss is pretty fast himself and can actually get quite ugly for you if you can't keep up in the second phase. As for the rest of the enemies, thankfully it is pretty simple, so focusing on beating Adventuring is your top priority. So without that being said, let's talk teams, beginning with the highlight of this patch, follow-up attackers, and especially the newly created Feixiao team, Fart team. As you probably have realized, the Memory Turbulence was tailor-made for Feixiao this time, and just frequent attackers in general, whether it be fast units or follow-up attackers. The first half is Wind and Imaginary Week, so whether you focus on Dr. Ratio or just the Fart team will do wonders in that half. Follow-up attack teams have been seeing a lot of love and a lot of usage, and this MOC stays no different. However, the same can't be said for the second half, as not only is Adventuring imaginary resistant, single target is detrimental in that half due to Adventuring's gamble attack. Firefly Super Break, which remains to be one of the best teams to use in MOC. Despite there being no recommended fire weakness this time around, Firefly's ability to implant the fire weakness is just so broken, and it makes her be able to be forced in any situation, this MOC being no different. So knowing that, despite the lack of a fire weakness on both halves, Firefly Super Break is still a top option for both halves of this MOC. Acheron Hypercarry. The classic Acheron team that actually just got recently buffed by Jiaoqi's release. To no one's surprise, Acheron is still a very strong unit even if lightning is not recommended. However, that is fake news, as in the second half, despite there being no lightning recommendation, Adventuring is weak to lightning. And as the other enemies are super easy in comparison, going Acheron in the second half is actually an incredible option. Especially since you have the AoE for the gamble mechanic, and her teams usually either being A, tanky enough to sustain through Adventuring's attack, or B, have AoE for the gamba. But that being said, I cannot confidently say the same thing for Acheron in the first half, as Kafka is resistant to lightning, so Acheron is not so good of a choice there. But that being said, an Acheron DOT team with, for example, Kafka Black Swan will do relatively well in the first half despite all that. Kafka Black Swan DOT, the team literally made for you in this patch's banners. One of the first genuine team that was able to hard force any content due to the nature of DOT and Kafka, and that still stays true. Despite the Kafka boss having lightning resistance, that doesn't stop Black Swan's Arcana from still hurting like a truck. And in addition to the wind weakness, which Black Swan and Huahua can take advantage of, so in the first half, Kafka Black Swan still remains to be a top option. And even in the second half, Adventuring having the lightning weakness makes this team pretty good there as well. Boohoo Break, a very strong team that in theory should be perfect for this MOC, since they are both a physical weak in the second half and a single target boss, which Boohoo is the best in, but that is not quite the case, as the adventuring boss fight really wants you to have AoE attackers, and with Buhyo's kit making him take more damage, surviving against the punishment attack will require a bit of extra work, whether it's avoiding his skill state or having a strong sustain. So while Buhyo Break is still a valid option for the second half, it will take a bit more effort than most other teams. Well, unless your Buhyo is just cracked and just one-shots adventuring, which is actually highly plausible. And for the first half, he's honestly decent there as well, just make sure you use your ultimate to implant physical weakness on the right targets. Yunli Hyper Carry. Enemy is fast? Check. Enemy is weak to physical? Check. Yunli is secretly one of the strongest units for this version of MOC. The frequent attacks from Aventurine, and honestly even Kafka 2, will trigger Yunli's counter attack very often. And this together with both bosses being physical weak, Yunli is actually a really good contender for this MOC. Together with her innate damage reduction, Yunli Hyper Carry is a very strong team for the second half and honestly for the first half as well. Clara Hyper Carry. For the same reasons I said before, Clara will appear here as well. For a standard unit, Clara is holding her ground quite well if I say so myself. As you probably can guess, nothing much really needs to be said, being a unit that almost identical to Yunli. Well, I should say Yunli is identical to Clara as she came first, but you get my point. Clara will perform decently too in both halves, just with a bit more effort as she is weaker than Yunli after all. Imbibitor Lune Hyper Carry. Whenever there is an imaginary weak MOC, D-Heal always gets a bit of spotlight, and this time it is true as well, as D-Heal Hyper is actually one of the strongest teams to be used in the first half. In the second half, I don't really think I need to explain it, Aventurine is imaginary resistance and that's really all you need to know. But in the first half, with every enemy being weak to imaginary and both waves having multiple targets makes D-Heal really strong in this MOC. Jinlu Hyper Carry. Every time Aventurine appears in the MOC, Jinlu is a prime unit to use for him. And that is with good reason, as she is both Ice Element and have frequent attack that are Blast makes her a prime unit to deal with Aventurine. Yes, although she does not clear nearly as fast as let's say an Acheron team or even a Yunli team, if you do not have access to any other teams, Jinlu will be a great option to use in the second half. As for the first half, technically you could brute force using Jinlu, but I'll suggest not to do it, and Kafka having Frozen Rest further reinforces that. Blade Hyper Carry. Last but not least, the team that everyone thinks gets left in the dust always comes back. With Jade's released and finally giving Blade a genuine fourth teammate, Blade actually becomes quite competent in the first half. Win weak and frequent attacks means Blade really loves Kafka too, low accurate by the way. But now with Jade, he really becomes quite a reliable follow-up attacker and will do some decent DPS as well. So while I'm not gonna pretend that this team is particularly fast at clearing the first half, he is overall just decent if you have no other option.